But okay, let's get to know the three of you first. So thanks. So Lone, despite being a very successful researcher in applied microbiology, and especially I work in aquaculture, and I know you have quite a legacy there and how the whole Danish industry on RAS systems is now mining gold based on some of your original ideas, sourced from the microbial world. Beyond that, you have also served on a wide range of committees in Denmark, but also the ERC committees, so you're used to see some very, very innovative ideas, or maybe some that are pretentious. But can you maybe elaborate a little bit about why you are here today, right now with us, except that Tom twisted your arm?
The honest answer is I got invited. No, I'm here because I happen to think that one of the major strategies in terms of saving the planet in a wide range of challenges we're facing is actually microbiology. So I'm not taking out the holobiont, but I think using and capitalizing on microbes, I think, is going to take care of a lot of stuff. We've heard lots of talks today. I also think this country, it's a pity Claus Felby is not here. I think this country is excellently suited, no offense to any other countries, but we really live off things that come out of a fermenter, and I'm not just talking about Wegovy. So I think if there's a country on the planet which per capita has the capability of using microbes as pure cultures, as cell factories, potentially as microbiomes, I think that's us. And I think the challenge now is moving from everything we've learned from E. coli to doing more complex mixture. And then, to me, an even more advanced step is then looking at the interaction with the host.
Okay, thank you. And I very much agree. Remember, we also have the state represented with us today. But first, let me then go to you, Jos. So first, thanks for stepping in very last minute. Yep. I've had some time to spy you online. So you're an award-winning professor in applied soil microbiology as well, and we've heard from both you and Lone today. So despite Tom getting down on his knees a few hours ago, why are should the rest of us be happy to have you here right now? Or why are you happy to be here? That was a naughty question.
Well, first of all, it feels quite uncomfortable to be in a couch, because usually some genes are activated that should not be activated here, so I'm suppressing some, but you know, I'd love to be here. So first of all, I think I should say that I love fundamental science. Let's put it like that. So the fascination for biology. So that's the first thing. The second is that in the last 5 to 10 years, I've started to get involved in projects where you also want to sort of like translate that fundamental knowledge into, you know, worldwide problems. And yeah, it requires a different sort of like focus, I should say. And you have to be able to step out of your comfort zone. That is absolutely what I experienced. I've shown a few examples of that today. It's quite different than, you know, the focus on fundamental scientific problems. So you start to talk about technology readiness levels, you know, all that kind of terminology, scalability. So it's a different ball game.
Thank you. Yeah. And last but not least, Stinus. So you, first and foremost, you're here to representing our parliament, and you are active in relevant areas. But also your background is non-negligible. You've been publishing very basic ancient genomes in Nature before going into politics. So we're very happy to have a politician who have a firm understanding of the value of basic research. And you're a heavy metal lover. I'm afraid we may not get into that today, but I would love to do a longitudinal study during the Copenhagen festival one day on what it does to the microbiome. But you agreed to sit here many months ago. Yes. So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on why you're happy to bridge your world with ours
Well, you should probably ask Tom, because I got an email from Tom, I don't know, a year ago or something, when he put together this conference, asking me whether he could put me on the application for getting funding for this. Whether that helped or not, I don't know, but I agreed, of course, because I know Tom from old days when I had a real job in research before I was elected to Parliament. So I'm here because Tom asked me nicely, and that's always a good start. But also because this is something that that interests me a lot. I mean, I was just here for the last session. I couldn't be here all day, unfortunately, but I should have brought my own slides, because one of the last projects I didn't call it hologenomics though, was doing soil microbiomes, looking at how global warming and use of fertilizer affected the microbiome and the plants and insects. Well, it was a large collaboration, of course, but that was the last big thing I did before I, first left academia and joined the private industry, and then now I'm in Parliament wasting my education there.
Thank you. Okay, so it's not deliberate. We ended up with 3 plant scientists.
Well, not a plant scientist. I'm just a bioinformatician.
Bioinformatician, yeah.
Yes.
So everything scientist.
I'm a marine scientist.
Yeah.
Come on.
But you're the photosynthesis. Okay. Anyway, so 1-1.
True.
So before we dive in, I have these questions, but please ask each other questions, so it's not just 3 parallel dialogues, if you feel inspired. So yes, today we've heard of numerous examples of how this new technologies in multi-omics and holo-omics, and including from 2 of you, is really pushing forward this field. But in terms of then really convincing non-scientists or very applied funding bodies or industry, we still kind of struggle with really convincing them why this is so cool or why there's really a big potential here. And I think one of the things we may really need is really some elegant textbook examples where we can show this is where this holistic approach really made a difference in terms of reducing disease outbreaks or yield and or et cetera. So based on this need, where Jos, for example, where do you think we have the biggest potential to find the first of these really? Like if you think back to your first evolutionary textbook, we have this peppered moth and industrial melanism. So where do you envision we get the first kind of really famous in the future textbook examples convincing stakeholders?
Yeah, if I look back, there were many years that I worked on one microbe at a time, and then it became microbiomes, and then it sort of like turned back to synthetic communities to reconstitute these phenotypes that we see. In terms of developing microbial inoculants, I always been in favor of that until about a couple of years ago. So industry, that's my experience, at least the current status of industry. I mean, they are okay with 1 microbe, they are okay with 2, but when it becomes more than 3 or 4, there is a problem in terms of registration, in terms of formulation, etc. One of my colleagues, Wietse de Boer, he was always in favor of augmenting the functional potential that is already present in the system. And with one of examples I showed today, I think if there is a breakthrough, I would expect it from that type of applications, that you activate functional traits that are already present in the system.
Cool. Lone,
Yeah, so I think it's a difficult question. So I'm going to be running a risk here, offending 2/3 or 9/10 of the people in the audience. And maybe it's not you, but somebody else. But there is a tendency, you said that technology is driving this. And I had a great collaboration with Beijing Genomic Institute over a number of years. And they had, I haven't seen so many terabytes of data ever in my life. And then they were struggling to write the scientific publications. We weren't even talking about applications, we were just talking about getting stuff published. And their major challenge was that they had all these data, and then I would ask, so why did you do it? So this is perhaps a caution, and maybe somebody said it yesterday. that I think what we need in this grander field is really to make sure that we ask the right questions and we do the analysis that is required for those questions, and not 10 times as much just because we can and we get money from the Novo Nordisk Foundation or wherever, or from Parliament once in a while. So, well, many of us do have money from the government, and that's fine. So I think that's really a caution when you ask about where we're going. So I think we really need the right question. Then I think we need what I would call full circle experiments. We've seen some beautiful examples from Jos, from others. If any of you have followed Mini Rosing's work on glacial rock flower, I mean, he will throw it on the fields of Africa and you'll see corn plants just growing like mad. And that's beautiful, and where I think we need to go back to the basic science is then to find the causality. Because you can observe things and you can do co-occurrences or even try to do correlations, but I think we need a few key examples. I think they're probably going to come out of the plant, horticulture, soil microbiome. I think that's where the whole field is furthest. I'm not sure that links up to your hologenomics, because is there a difference on the individual maize plant level? I'm looking at Jos. Maybe not, maybe that's variant genomics that is of interest. But I really think we need to go ask the why, do the analysis that's required, make the mutants or whatever is required, find the metabolites that are governing what's changing it, and actually linking, doing molecular causality. And then you can start selling the concept also, I think, to industry. But I think we see a lot of data generation where I'm asking, why are we doing this? And I think I lack those, and it becomes tricky because getting that last bit of the circle is just so difficult. But I think plant, soil, rhizosphere is, there's a few studies when we look at human fecal transplants, which you could say is at some level a hologenomic approach as well, where I think we're beginning to see data that can actually be convincing.
No, thank you very much. And really what I hear, you can upset me and other PIs for generating a lot of data and handing it over to our students, but I just really, all students, postdoc, listen carefully. This is useful advice. It's not...
Well, I think there's valid in generating data. I think there's validity in describing the systems, because that is what a lot of the omics technology do. But if we're just, don't get me wrong, if we're just left with the description of this vast amount of data and this went up and this went down, and that's genes tend to go up and down, right? Then I think we're missing an obligation as scientists to make sure we get all the way through.
Thank you, and maybe use that as a segue to you, Stinus, because I guess a lot of descriptive correlations is also maybe not the best case to convince politicians or non-scientific stakeholders.
No, I think so. If you just take one step back, so basic research, just selling that concept to politicians in general is difficult. Most of my colleagues tend to want to see some product, something that you can sell or make money off, or something like that. So just explaining that basic research is important, because that's where we generate new ideas, new knowledge, something that might become the next Novo or whatever adventure. So that's something that I keep struggling with. I think it's become a bit better over the past few years, but it's still a struggle. And then I think in this particular case here, selling the concept of hologenomics, this is a new concept to me, by the way, or metagenomics, or whatever you want to call it. For instance, cattle, looking at that. Climate change. There was a story a few years ago about changing the feed for cattle, and then they fart less, and that's a good thing for the environment and for the climate change. So, and that's of course something to do with the gut microbiome, I assume, because that's how it works, right? So that's a concept I think we sell, saying this is something we need to study, because we need to understand why is it that if a cow eats this, they fart this much, if they eat that, they fart this much. If you can do something with either the feed or the microbiome, we can maybe save the world, as I heard a few people say today. I think that's something politicians understand. Say, this is something that kind of fits into the whole narrative, why we do science. And I think that's a good concept. And then, of course, you said plants, but I think cattle as well is something pigs. I mean, we have quite a few pigs in Denmark. Even after this new so-called Green Deal, we'll have maybe even more. So that's something that you should probably study, because that's where the money is. Well, actually not, because we don't make that much money out of agriculture in Denmark. But at least there's a lot of it, and we spend a lot of money on it. So that would be my message, somehow tied into climate change. And then, but I don't want to. I mean, I think it's important to explain why basic research is important. Why we just do research to know more, to understand the world better. I think that has value in itself. And I think most of you would agree, of course.
Yeah.
So can I chip in on that? I don't know. So this is an international audience, and maybe we should ask you a question. So maybe I was really naive, but I thought when we came out of COVID, well, we're not out yet. Numbers are increasing as far as I learned today. But when we came out of the big black hole of COVID, I thought that now society at large, not just parliament and politicians, but general population would understand how important it is that we have what I in Danish call forskningsberedskab, which is a readiness for science. So if we didn't have Ali Salanti and all the other people we had in Denmark that could sort of move in, take 10 years of basic science and throw it into vaccines or throw it into this and that. So I thought that on the other side of that, everybody would understand how important it was to have this sort of ground level of the pyramid of science. But somehow it got lost super quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it went. And I don't know if Denmark is unique in just, there was this little peak where, no offense, but even the Prime Minister was promoting basic science, and I thought, yeah, now we've got it. And then it just faded.
Yeah. But it's right. I mean, we had a few, years, months, where we had scientists in news every day, right? That was great. It was great to see them, but I mean, the background wasn't that great. But the political reality is that we have a very short-term memory. Yeah. And right now, we're back to where we were before. There's no understanding of why it was important to do research in, say, stable RNA molecules. Why would you do that? What's the point? Well, if we hadn't done that 10, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. Yeah. But that concept is lost on most of my colleagues, unfortunately. Or at least they move on to something else. And I'll bet that when we have to discuss research funding in a few months, in the fall this year, it'll be the same. Yeah. There'll be less money for basic research and more for something tied up in probably climate or green transition or something like that. Because that's where the focus is right now. Yeah. And just look at space research. I mean, that's kind of off topic here. But now there's a focus on that because we had a Danish astronaut. A year from now, it'll be gone.
Yeah, maybe I can add. So I think indeed this field needs some success stories, right, to make things move. The other thing I wanted to mention, and that's also including in my talk, sometimes we're trying to, bring the microbiome to solve questions or problems that we ourselves created, right? I mean, let's be fair. Many of the problems that we're trying to address, we created ourselves due to scale, due to I talk about crop production, monocultures, So, I mean, at the front end, we should also try to work on solutions, and I think the insect, as a replacement of proteins, I think is an excellent example of solving things at the front end. Yeah, I'm not sure if that scale is going to create new problems again, but it's. So it's microbiomes is not a solution for everything. So let's be realistic, right?
Probably not.
Well, yeah, maybe things just move super slowly. So I graduated in 1985. That's a long time ago. So I'm trained as a food scientist / food microbiologist from what was then the Veterinary University, and I can remember lots of people saying, so these bacteria, can you make a living out of knowing something about bacteria? I mean, there was clinical microbiology, and then there were the few vets that did food hygienic testing for salmonella and whatnot. Okay, admittedly, this is almost 40 years ago. And 40 years may be too long, but walk out into even what I would call the general public, at least in Denmark, microbes are not just bad. Most people, and I do a little bit of public outreach, understands that microbes are also good. Everybody has heard about the green porridge of Olof Borby, a very famous Danish professor, and apologies for where is the Greenland? Sorry. For people living here, it's good to eat more green stuff. And that's what Olof has been promoting, and I think locally here in Copenhagen is probably... So it's just to say the fact that microbes are useful and that they interact with the host is something that's... It resonates now. It just takes a lot of time. So 3 good success stories.
In 40 years.
40 years.
Thanks. Yeah,
I'm going to be gone.
Scared for a bit when I was listening to Stinus. Okay, we have to wait for the next pandemic to make the next push. But then Jos nicely followed up, and maybe the problems, we already have them. If we can just find a way to pitch the most relevant problems to address with
I think my point is that you shouldn't depend on politicians funding your research, because they won't understand necessarily why you're doing what you're doing. So you should probably work more for increasing funding for basic research, because then you can apply for that, because then it's not going to be politicians, but researchers actually creating what you want to do. Because we, in general, know very little about science. So you don't want us to decide what to spend money on. That's my take on all of this. The less politicians control where to spend the money, the better it is.
So how do we do that? Because we already have Novo and a lot of other private foundations, and then the public funding, the majority goes into the Innovation Foundation.
And that's what I try to push against. So now it's going to be Danish politics, but we have this year we're going to have like 5 billion probably that we're going to distribute in the fall. And if I could decide, I would spend maybe, I don't know, keep 1 billion or something that we politicians can play around with, because then there's something. And the rest of it should be given to increase the basic funding of universities, and then increase the funding for the, what's it called, Danish free...
DFF.
Yes, whatever that's called in English, I don't know.
Independent Research Fund
exactly.
Denmark.
Yes. See, I've been out of research for so long that I forget all the terms. We don't speak English in Parliament.
We changed names all
We're
the time.
not allowed to speak English in Parliament. So yeah, that would be the ideal, I think, to do it like that, because then it's going to be spent where we get the most research out of it, and not where we think we'll get the most bang for the buck, because we don't know, basically.
Thanks. So I will move on to my next and last question before the audience, and we've probably already touched upon this already, so bear with me if it sounds repetitive, but still, I'll kind of then wrap up this discussion in asking, like, how do we then fully realize this potential we have that you mentioned, Lone, as well, that we have this. So we have the basic research contingent, we have industry and companies that are driven by profit, but have a close connection to what we do, and then we have the politicians, and maybe we can write them off for now, according to Stinus. But where should we see the main push coming from? Is it too early to just have the industry take the lead, and is it too risky to have the researchers nerd away with no real direction?
So I suppose, do we have any? Do we have anybody representing FMC or Novonesis in the audience? So I think, I mean, again, this becomes, don't get very Danish, sorry for that. But we certainly have companies either that are Danish or they have affiliations or units here in Denmark that are pushing in the plant biocontrol, that are pushing in terms of, let's call them animal probiotics or substitutes for whatever we feed to the pigs and the cattle. So there is ongoing research at the industrial level, and I think if you go to the US, there's a huge endeavor both at university and industry level. So I think maybe coordinating this, and that becomes difficult because one company is not going to tell you what they... So for a long time we had 2 companies in Denmark. One was called Christian Hansen and one was called Novozymes. And some of us had sort of collaborations with both of them, and I don't want to offend any of these two companies, which are now one. But they were doing very, very similar things, but did not, I mean, you would have NDAs with either of them. So I think sometimes it's also a question of getting things combined, and I think the same is probably true for universities. I can only speak for the Danish universities, but I see a lot of really great microbiology, and it's not that we're not collaborating, because we certainly are, we write joint applications, but I can see that in this field we could benefit from joining forces rather than doing a little bit of too much parallel stuff.
Just need 600 million krone Novo Center.
Well, I've tried to convince Klaus Felby about that for some time. I've not been successful. And I know there are other people in the audience who have tried as well.
Yeah. Well, let's keep trying. So you've had a lot of collaborations as well. So how do your industry collaborations take shape or come about?
There is a new initiative now, actually initiated by the government, which is called a growth fund. It's called the Holomicrobiome Project Initiative. It's a research initiative for 10 years. 200 million euros is invested, and it's a joint sort of like collaboration between academics and industry. So side by side, and I think that is usually, that works quite well. If you want to move towards, innovation and, success stories with the microbiome.
So is that an
I think that's the way
investment
forward, yeah.
So did that investment come from the state, or is it a mix?
It's a mixed investment, both from industry, and these growth funds, they are usually designed also for, let's say, Dutch industry to be competitive in the international field. So they teamed up with academics now. So I think that's a great, I think a nice example of, to move the field forward in terms of application, right? Yeah.
We've had something similar in Denmark, I guess.
Yeah.
So that can be done. And I think what would be the setting point here would be focus, as the political climate is now, on climate and on the environment. So something that can kind of help solve all the issues there. I think that would be something that could actually be realized.
But it should not be or. So there should be, sufficient funding for basic research.
I agree.
To feed that
Yes.
other line. Otherwise, you're going to get lost.
No, you're completely right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But is that something that's seeded in your part of the hood, Stinus? These like 10-year, like really, really long-term investments in this hub. So you just have this, now you have the next annual budget into the research reserve, or...
Yeah, that's the way it's set up in Denmark. We have these annual funding rounds where we kind of decide what to spend money on. And of course, if we fund a project, that can run for many years, of course. But it is a very short-term way we do it. And in principle, after the next election, there could be a majority that wants to do something else, and then we'll shift focus completely. That could happen. And that's why I think it's the wrong way to do it. Also because it started out being around 700 million, I think. Yeah. And now it's around 5 billion. And that's a lot of money for politicians to kind of hand out. And I just think it's the best, we don't get the best value for money, basically. And I think it would be better to maybe put it into whatever growth foundation, whatever, something. Yeah. And then run with that and have a long-term focus instead of having these annual negotiations as we do now.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not up to me, unfortunately. Not alone. But if you can convince your local parliaments, members of parliament or the minister or something like that, then it would be easier. I do what I can, but just one person.
No, but it's true from experience. I'm involved in 2 10-year programs, and it gives so much sort of like, peace of mind that not in, a couple of years' time you got to come up with a new proposal again, right? It's and then fingers crossed, for funding.
Yeah.
It really, you can really build on developing.
But I think the main problem is that most politicians don't have the long-term view. They want to hand out money or something, and that's something that pays off in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because there'll be something else getting being there and getting congratulated for something they didn't do.
Fortunately, our Minister of Education and Science, he is a scientist himself.
Ooh.
So
See, that's a step up from Denmark.
yeah, exactly. So that made all the difference.
I
With these
agree.
types of programs.
It means a lot. It matters who sits in that position, I agree. And we do not have a researcher in that position.
Yeah.
So
Morten, can I make a point? So I understand completely the difference between what we now call basic science and applied science. And perhaps it's more correct to say that it's very short-term goals and slightly longer-term goals. So I seem to remember statistics, and now I'm looking at Anja and Tom, that the Danish National Research Foundation did a few years ago. So that foundation will fund centers that are 6, very likely 10 years of age, which gives you this perspective of take time, find new stuff. You can take risks in terms of going down new avenues. But I have a recollection that they also looked at IPR and patents and spin-off companies and innovation, and found out that a very large fraction of whatever was produced in that window in Denmark came out of these centers of excellence. So there was no discrepancy between giving money to something that was very basic and fundamental and then actually having an applied spin-off. And I think Anja's center is probably a prime example of generating spin-offs and innovation and product closer to market things. So I think there's also a question, there's also something that we need to be better at. So it's not sort of black and white and two separate worlds. No. It is a continuum, and we only feed the innovation pipeline with some long-term investments. And I think that storytelling, we've perhaps not been good at that.
No, thank you. So I'm going to use this point to then segue into to all of your questions. Thank you very much. I have more than we can cover. So Holo Anchan asks, yesterday we discussed about the complexity of holobionts and how we have to embrace this complexity. So then how do we digest this complexity without oversimplifying so policymakers can make sound decisions? And I guess one way might be to then add a value on the basic research, so we're then fed into a startup, so we can see this.
Yeah, but I mean, science is complex. It always is. There's never one simple answer to a complex question. This field or any other field, that's the case. And I think, I don't want to. So my colleagues do a lot of great work. That's not they really do. But it's just if you're not from a science background, it's really hard to understand research. It is. You can't read statistics. You can't understand why you need to study for 5-10 years to maybe find out something. It's not easy to understand the difference between basic research and applied research. And if you don't understand that, it's easier to say, well, of course we should spend money on the applied part, because that's going to work and do something and whatever. So there's something there that we just need in general to be better explaining why research matters, why science is important, not just to us, but to the general population, I think. And how to do that, how to take one of your projects and explain in layman's terms why that is important. I can't do that for you. You need to be able to do that. I can just say that way before I even thought about entering politics, I spent a lot of time trying to explain science in the public media and just try to say why it's cool, why it's important. And it's difficult. It really is. It takes time to learn to do what you did today, but it also takes time to learn how to explain what you do so normal people, so to speak, understand it. And I think it's something that every researcher should try and do, because at least in Denmark, and I said that many times, we pay for your education. You should also kind of explain why what you do matters. Not just to us politicians, but in general.
I'm not sure we answered the question.
It
is a very difficult question.
Maybe I can just follow up. I think that was Thomas's point. Maybe we should just call everything applied. because eventually we don't know if it's not applied. Anyways, I'll segue into the next one, which is a bit more concrete. So someone would like to know your opinion about the future use of antimicrobials in a sustainable agri-science world.
So define antimicrobials.
I-
Because if antimicrobials are antibiotics, so I think what we've heard, I mean, some of the probiotic concepts I would consider antimicrobials. I work with a startup company called Back to Life, which are producing single-domain antibodies against bacterial virulence factors. So they have single-domain antibodies against ETEC, so enterotoxigenic E. coli, toxins, and pili. They work beautifully in pig trials, I can tell you. It's just been published. There's obviously patent and production. That is an antimicrobial that is very sustainable. So I think the microbiome-based science or microbiome engineering, I'm from DTU, we engineer stuff. So I see a lot of opportunity for sustainable antimicrobials which are not antibiotics. And I think that's partly something that can be explained to politicians, to everybody. They actually do understand the antibiotic resistance crisis, I think. So any kind of microbiome-based solution that take away the risk of antibiotic resistance development, I think is a cool story.
I agree, and it's not. I think like two weeks ago I had a debate about exactly this. So this is something that's way up on the political radar in Denmark, at least. I guess worldwide, and it should be because it's not a Danish problem. And I think that's another topic that would definitely be easy to get political attention, and that's some way to get around the use, or at least limit the use of antibiotics, obviously. Because basically from a health perspective, of course, that's where we mainly focus. That's a big issue. So if we can do something to help that, that would be something that will have a lot of political attention, definitely.
Well, that may be worthwhile to mention, Lona, the C4D initiative, right? So from Leiden University, and I mean, with a lot of groups worldwide, we have started this C4D. It's called Community for Drugs. You can look it up on the website. There is a website of the, but that's basically an academic public initiative to, start to develop or to think about, new ways to add on to the antibiotic, crisis that is coming up. And it involves also new chemistry, but it also involves microbiomes. So there are initiatives in that sense, but it's very early on. So, and if people are interested to join there, if I speak on behalf of the coordinator, then it's open for that. So the more, the merrier.
Right. Thank you. Okay, I'll round up with one last question for you, Stinus. So Anonymous asks how we researchers can better reach political stakeholders, as apparently Twitter and scientific journals seem to miss the target. So how can we do better to interact?
Well, we are on Twitter, or X, as it's called today. So that's actually a very easy way to reach politicians in Denmark, at least me. So, no, but actually I've said many times that researchers are some of the worst lobbyists out there. And a lobbyist is a good thing. I mean, that just means you work to enhance whatever topic you're working on. And then I can agree or not agree with you. But I mean, I get contacted daily by people who want to, sell stuff or whatever. I'm a spokesperson for health, meaning that all the industry and patient organizations or whatever, they email me quite regularly. But researchers are really bad. They've become better over the past few years. I don't know whether I can take any credit in that, but they are really bad at doing that. And I know why. Because when I was at university, then you could, in a coffee break, sit around and you could say, oh, these stupid politicians, they know nothing. Why don't they do this or that? And then you go back and do your research. You don't act on it because you don't know how to do it. But it's actually fairly easy. It's just email us. And people do that all the time. And you can do that. Of course, it works better if you speak on behalf, not of just behalf of yourself, but on the university or some organization. And I know that people are working on establishing a network in Denmark representing more or less researchers in general. That's difficult. I mean, it's like herding cats, but maybe that would work, because that's how you do it. If you don't tell us where the problem is or why what we do is stupid, then we won't know. And a lot of people tell us all the time, so you should also do that. And so it's Twitter, X, it's emails, it's showing up in Parliament. In Denmark, we have an open Parliament. You can always ask for either a meeting with one of us or meeting in one of the sitting committees we have. And people do that all the time. You can do that too. So it's actually fairly easy to get in contact with us in Denmark. I don't know about parliaments in other countries, but I assume it's more or less the same.
Yeah, we have the same. Yeah.
No, thanks. So listen, generate, Generation Z. No Twitter, email. But on that
always
note,
email the PA, because otherwise I'll miss it.
there's one. It's not a question; it's just a comment. So capitalized. Thank you, Lone. We need to ask questions and not apply technologies and throw a lot of meaningless data out there. So
I didn't say they were
Thank you.
meaningless, Morten.
I did, but someone else did.
So why is the most important word
Anonymous.
in science?
Yeah.
Why do you do what you do? Why do you use the techniques that you're using? And why is it you doing it?
So thank you. So just before we applaud the panel members, we're a few minutes away from the poster session. I know everyone is tired, but it's going to loosen up from here on. But please, we have 40 posters out there with a lot of really, really cool stuff. So please give the authors of the posters a little bit of love and attention while enjoying a drink in the Danish sun. But please join me in applauding our panel members for this session.